Hello, everybody. Welcome to Adobe Live. I'm Flynn Tracy, and I'm joined once again by Alwyn Hunt. Alwyn, how are you doing?
I'm good, thanks, mate. Thanks for asking.
Good to see you. I like almost every time. I'm never sure where you're going to be. You're changing location like every single time we
I
do a
know.
live stream. But I'm glad you could. I'm glad we could do it. Get it done.
Today I'm beaming in from the Bahamas. Actually, it's tropical out there, even though I'm wearing a jersey.
Nice one. Oh, let's get some music started. We got some new tunes this week, guys. So let us know. Let us know if we're on the money. I'm just going to quickly bring up the schedule here. So check it out. This is our schedule this week. A little bit different. Yes, we got to sleep in. So exciting. Week 16, I think, of working from home live streams. And this is the first time we've had a week where we get to sleep in. Johanna and I are very excited. Yeah, and Alan, I'm sure you're excited as well. A little bit more time to get things organized today. So Wednesday, 10:30, that is us. Getting started with 3D, part 3 with Alwyn Hunt. That's us right now. On Thursday, we have Tim Northey coming back, TK North, with some photography. Thursday, again, we have illustration with Yori Napati, and that's her first Adobe live stream. Very exciting. And then on Friday, we have photo manipulation with Ramez Hari Krishnasamy, which is, yeah, there's so much going on. And also to mention, my good friend and very well-known face of Adobe Live, Andrew Hochradel, is going to be doing the Creative Challenge Illustrator Creative Challenge, I should say, right after this stream. So we're going to hang out for that. So there's just so much going on. It's super exciting. But we're here to talk about 3D. So this is our third episode in this series, Alwyn, and you've been taking us through the wonderful world of 3D animation, like production, all sorts of things. We've been learning so much from you, and this has been such a fantastic series.
Yeah, I know, and it's crazy to think, like in 4 episodes, we're trying to cram in a whole, 3D production pipeline. There's so many areas to it, and so much information to share. But we're going to try and get through as much as we possibly can, and just make sure that people have a really high level understanding of how things actually work, and get some insights into films and stuff like that. So yeah, really excited about today's episode. So ready to launch into it.
Ready to roll. Well, guys, we've decided that today would be a good day, rather than having a Q&A break in the middle, just to ask questions as we're going. So we want to have a bit more of a discussion today. So please feel free to ask questions as we're going along. But yeah, ready to switch over to your screen whenever you are.
Cool. Let's just drop that down. Excellent. So yeah, let's start today. Yeah, you got it now, Flynn? All
got
good?
it now. All good.
Awesome. So today, what I wanted to do was really just look at lighting and effects. Now, these are the next 2 disciplines following the ones that we talked about last week, which were, we just got this. Here's a recap of the image that I've got, and just to go through, we covered modeling, we covered texturing, we covered rigging, animation, and today we're going to look at effects and lighting. These are the next 2 in the pipeline, and actually not in that order. We're going to cover lighting first, and then we're going to go back to effects. Effects kind of where they sit in the pipeline, they sort of work a little bit outside of the pipe, so they can be working independently. Flynn, is it possible just to touch the music down a little bit? I feel like I'm talking over the music just
No
a
worries.
fraction. Thanks, mate. I don't know if you can do that on my end. Yeah, that's perfect.
Cool.
Thanks, mate. So we're going to cover lighting, we're going to cover effects, and the first area that I want to talk about really with lighting is that in virtual lighting, the same principles that you learn for traditional photography and lighting setups are exactly the same as what you would find in 3D lighting. So, if you've done any sort of photography in a studio, or, you've done some courses online about photography and lighting and all the rest of it, like I said, those same principles carry across. And even further back than that, when if you study any sort of art, and you'll be drawing and you're learning about shadows and how the edge falls off, and also highlights and how that reacts to a surface, all those same basic principles and fundamentals are really great knowledge for understanding 3D lighting or virtual lighting. So in this slide, we're just looking at the top. Obviously, there's a studio set up there, and we've got like a series of lights and reflectors just to help with our lighting. And then down here in the left-hand corner, we've got ambient light, direction light, point light, and spotlight. So these are just a few sort of lights that you'll find, or terms, or lighting descriptions, or not light names of lights that you'll find in virtual lighting. Like I said, they're very similar. And then this other image here is really looking at what a setup looks like in 3D. And I'm going to take you through that when we go into Maya and just have a bit more of a look at that.
Nice.
So what I want to just take you through first, and a lot of people don't realize this, but if we just drop into this next slide in its dimension. So what I want to do as a first sort of demo is take you into Adobe Dimension. Now, Dimension can be found on, if you've got your Creative Cloud license and you've got your little desktop app here, you can find Dimension under 3D and R. You can see Dimension here. Now, this is a great little tool, and to be honest, I never used this much before sort of coming to Adobe, but for people that are wanting to understand lighting without like getting into technical setups and having to know each and individual light and all the rest of it, this is a really easy or low entry point to learning about lighting. So I'm just going to bring up Dimension and just show you what I'm talking about there. So I've got Dimension open over here, which is, have I got Dimension open? Yeah, I've got it open here. So I'm just going to pull that across.
That's a lot of windows.
That is a lot of windows. It's confusing for my brain to look at that this early in the morning as well. And this is Dimension. This is when you launch Dimension, this is what you get faced with. And again, you've got like a little 3D window here that, that I can rotate round and scroll in and out with and do all funny things with. It's a 3D viewer. So what I want to do today is bring in our little character, Eddie, that we've been working on right from the start. And I can just go in here and I can import in content, and then I can go 3D model. And then I've got Eddie here. So what I've done here is, and I'm going to show you when I next go into Substance Painter, but I can actually export out my textured character from Substance Painter as a dimension file. And what that does is it packages the whole thing up for me. And I've got this OBJ of Eddie, but when I bring that in, it's going to bring in all those textures that I created in Substance Painter. So you can see that with my character here, it's when it loads, and there it goes there. So there's Eddie.
Nice.
So we can see him loaded up, and we've got, textures on there. I went ahead and actually added a bit more detail to it just to kind of add a bit more interest to it. But you can see here, we've got him in the viewport. So the cool thing with this is now that I've got my textured 3D model in Dimension, I've got this little window. So I've got a couple of little buttons across here, and I can filter by models, which I'm looking at right now. And the cool thing with this is that I can actually go into Adobe Stock and download more 3D models if I like as well. So I can just pull that onto the canvas, and it will create this, this asset here, which is a can, which I'm not going to worry about right now, but I'm going to just remove that. But what I want to bring your attention to is also materials. So we also talked about Substance Source, which we had almost 4,000 materials. So Substance Source, you can bring any of those 4,000 materials, and you can see there's already by default some materials in here, and I can literally drag and drop this straight onto my character as well, any of these materials. So let's just do that. And you can see that I've added this copper material now to my character. So not only can I add new materials to it, but I can also access those other 4,000 materials. So I'm just going to undo that. And then the next tab is the one that I wanted to bring some focus to, which is our lighting. So you can see in here by default, they've got these lighting set up. So I don't even have to go through and create individual lights. I can just drag and drop this lighting setup in here, and you can see that it's created a key light, a fill light, and a backlight already for me. So it's really, really, by default, you get all this for free, and you don't have to think about it. And I can then go in and I can rotate those lights around, those individual lights, to control my shadows.
Right. So it's bringing in like a lighting setup like you were talking about before. Like if you're physically in the space, you might have like a soft light, a hard light, or whatever it is, and then you brought it in and you can manipulate where that light is coming from, and therefore where the shadow is going and everything.
Exactly, Flynn. And
Cool.
then, I can, adjust things like the color light if I wanted to add more interest to it. Or, for example, if I wanted to actually just go back, I'm just going to remove that that light rig. And there's funky ones as well, right? So there's ones where that's already got color introduced to it. And the cool thing with this one is that it's actually got an image. So you can see it's actually sourcing an image to be able to light this asset. So what I just wanted to do quickly here was actually even go across to the next tab, which is images. So if I go up to images here, maybe I want to just present my character on some sort of background. So you can see here I've got like a background of a room which has been blurred out, and I've got my table. Now I want my character here to actually sit on the table, so in the right perspective. So there's a cool button here that says Match Image. Now I'm just going to click on that, and what that does, it goes through a series of processes where it actually looks at the aspect ratio of the canvas size, it looks at the light setup, and it also looks at the perspective of the camera. And if I click on OK, and it's also going to use this image to light my object. So it's sourcing all this light information here, and it's going to actually light my character for me. So I'm going to hit OK, and it runs through that, and you can see automatically it's grounded him onto that desk, and he's already got shadows falling on the desk. And then I can go through and I can just do things like, position him however I want, or I can go back to that image and then I can increase the intensity, or I can just drop it back down. But it's actually using the image to light my character, which is really, really cool.
Wow.
And then I can go through and, maybe I'm not happy with where the shadow's lying. You can see at the bottom I'm rotating around my object, and maybe I want some of these specular highlights just to really emphasize his shape. So I can just, position them accordingly. Like I said, I can introduce colors, I can soften the shadows, I can do a number of different things. Or I can actually go into the individual lights that's part of this light rig and be able to, again, go through and maybe just pick out some colors from my image. And also, again, increase intensity or drop that back down.
So that sort of thing helps it look a bit more realistic, right? Like it can use the environment to make the lighting match the space.
Absolutely. So maybe you're a student and you've got a 3D model and you're like, I just really want to be able to drop this into an environment without having to build out an environment, which is going to take me the next 4 years. So, to present this thing, maybe you just go, okay, cool. I've got an image. I've got a cool background. This is how I want my 3D model to be presented. And if, like I say to a lot of students, if you're, working on, being a modeling artist in 3D, then spend your time learning that discipline. Understand how lighting works, but don't spend your time, having to learn all these other disciplines. So this is just a really easy way for you to be able to tap into some lighting rigs and be able to quickly set something up without having to go and relearn all this stuff. It's just a really easy way to be able to present. So once you've got your character in there, there's a couple of other really cool features that I just wanted to bring a highlight to while I'm in here. So down here, we've got some images and they've got their alphas cut out. We can just drag and drop these images, straight onto our model. And you can see that it's now placed it on the actual surface of our model there. So then I can go through and actually just move that around on the surface of my 3D model. So maybe this is a logo for Eddie that I was really, I'd created in Photoshop. I can import that into Dimension and then be able to just position that logo. I can scale it up, I can scale it down, I can rotate it, I can do all sorts of things with it. So it's just another really quick way of being able, maybe you've done, maybe you've missed it doing this process in Substance Painter and you just want to be able to put a logo on there. So this is just a really quick way to be able to do that.
That's cool. So you could just, any logo that you bring in, you can bring in, what type of file types is it? Is it like PNGs?
Yeah, PNGs typically, because they hold the alpha. So it would be a PNG just to store that alpha in the file. So
alpha is motion and 3D for transparent background, right?
Exactly. So if you're in Photoshop and you've cut something out and you just want to have a transparent background, you'd save that as a PNG file, and then that would embed the alpha in that actual image. And then the dimension recognizes that alpha, and that's why you have a transparent background around the actual cutout here.
Nice.
And you can see, this one's got an alpha as well, right? As opposed to something which is more of a solid shape.
Yeah. Johanna had a question from chat. Which of these lights would you recommend for beginners to mention to start with? Are all the lighting setups easy to work with?
Yeah, good question. Like if we look at this light setup, and this is what I was saying earlier about understanding sort of basic lighting principles from a photography studio. This one here, your 3-point light, that is your classic studio lighting setup. So you've got your camera in front of you, you've got a light here, you've got a light at the back, and you've got like a fill light and a rim light. Rim light is just adding, nice bit of lighting around the edge of your model. So a 3-point light setup is your classic sort of lighting studio setup. So, I mean, for me, that's where I sort of always start and go with that. And this is like when we're talking about this sort of lighting, and I'm going to talk later in this episode about another technique, which is what we use actually a little bit here with actually using the environment to light our character. When we're adding these 3-point lights, what we're trying to do is really just add details to our model, right? So we're trying to give it more complexity with our lighting. But in fact, if I turned off that 3-point light and just used our environments, it's still being lit, but it's really flat. You can see there it's really just flat and not much going on. Yes, I could go in here, I could kick up the intensity, but it's not getting those really nice little specular highlights, right? So these additional lights are really just to help emphasize shape and details within your model.
Cool.
So you can see there, just adding those lights back in, we're just getting those really nice little specular highlights. The other cool thing within Dimension is you've got your other tab up here. You've got your two main tabs, Design and Render. This Dimension is really, really easy to use. There is really only these two menus. If I go into Render, I've got the option here to save it as a PSD or a PNG, a flat PNG, which would be, if I'm going to just do a single frame render. Now, if I say I've saved this file out already as a PSD, and what I'm going to show you what that looks like. So I'm going to pull up Photoshop here, and this is what our character looks like in Photoshop. So I've got the image, but if we look at our layers, you can see that by default, it already generates all these additional layers for me, and I haven't created these. This is what Dimension does for me. So for example, I can go in and maybe I want to isolate this arm and make it slightly darker, so I can come through and then I can just select that area and be able to go back to my model. I'll turn that off, and then be able to actually, if I run a hue and saturation or maybe a brightness or whatever, I can come back through and control individual parts. So it allows me to be able to do some post work in Photoshop even after I've rendered it. So we've got things like an ID, we've got things like depth map, so we're able to put sort of softness on our character. And then I've got my individual render of my 3D model saved on a separate layer, and I've got my background. So it does a really, for default, it gives me a lot of really great information with my new layers here.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's great that you can bring it into Photoshop. And I noticed that all the, like, I don't know if limbs or appendages or something were all different colors. Does that come in? Do they come in different colors? Like there was like a hot pink in there. Is that so that you can individually select them with things like the quick select wand and all that sort of stuff?
Exactly. So it just gives me the greater control to be able to select these individual parts of my model. So it's really super. And even if I wanted to go further detail, I've got this selection mask where I can select even, like if I wanted to go in here now and select that arm and that arm, then I can, easily adjust my model without having to go back and retexture it, remodel, re-render it and all the rest of it. I can do a lot of post work just based off these ID masks, which is, can save a lot of time,
Yeah, cool.
So that's dimension, which I just wanted to, just again, if you're new to lighting, then you've got a lot of really fun lighting rigs already in here. And like I said, you can experiment with that. You've got your ability to bring in your own image here. I can import an image here and drop it into the background, and again, use that to light my character as well. So yeah, that's a little bit of dimension. Now I'm just
sorry. What are the patterns over there to the left-hand side?
Yeah, so for example, maybe I wanted to just use a bland background, so I can just drag and drop this in here, and you can see it just replaces my background. Like I said, I can bring in any image here. So maybe I've taken one of an outdoor setting, and I've got him, like I want to use my own image, so I can import it into Dimension. Import content. I can import, image as a light or as a background. So I've got all these options within Dimension to be able to use my own material.
Cool. And can you bring your own images? So like on the other one where there was a bench, and then you rendered it so that it looked much more in situ, like it placed it down, it changed the perspective, it seemed like. Can you do? Does it do that with any image, or is there a special image type that you have to use, or can you get just your own photos and bring them in, or any tips around that?
So like if I just grab another image that's got a different table, and you can see here, this could be my image. Could be it just does it for any image, right? So I've got Eddie who's floating in midair right now. If I go into my camera and I've got this little button down here, match camera perspective. If I hit that, it's going to go through and it recognizes that ground plane and just drops it straight down there. Wow. So a lot of time, when you're working in 3D, different 3D programs, you'll be sitting there trying to work out, have I got it lined up? Have I not? This is a great button just to be able to, give you exactly where you need to be, right? So really, really, really useful little tool.
That's cool.
And here's another image just to show that. Completely different perspective again. And if I just go back into my camera and hit ground plane, drops it on there, and you can see the shadow, falling nicely on that ground plane now.
That's fantastic. Yeah, that's crazy. So you could experiment with your own photos, like your home desk or your kitchen table, whatever.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah. So just super, and you can see even with the camera perspective there that it's quite a narrow camera or lens angle, so it actually recognizes the camera information as well. Just drop that in there, which is so really, really fun, and like I said, very easy to learn. So I'm just going to drop out of Dimension and move on to the next part of our slide. So what I wanted to do here was just take it back a step and then talk about how in a feature animation movie, like this is Coco, for example, but any sort of Pixar feature animation, and talk about how they light these massive films, right? Like how does somebody go about lighting these films, and who works out exactly what the lighting should be, and it's also different, like you got different characters. So what we're looking at here is what they call a color script. So this is one of the first things that when a film gets, approved and, that gets the green light to go ahead, they create this color script. And this is really just illustrations. These aren't renders. These are just illustrations of what each scene is going to look like for a color, for color-wise. And all these colors, and if we just move to the next one, I don't know if you've got that, Flynn. Have you got that on? Did you manage to download that?
Yep, I think I've got it here. So do you want to watch?
If you want to just play it, just so that it's a bit smoother.
All right, who's in there?
I'm sorry. What's
go
going
back.
on? I'm just dreaming.
I don't know how much of this you can show. Whoops, sorry.
Yeah, go back. That's okay. You know what, Flynn? Just let me throw it back over to me, and I'm just going to show this one here, because I'm just going to scrub through it, which is what this does is really, it's looking at that individual scene and then looking at the scenes around it, right? These are just illustrations, but it's looking at the scenes around it. And this is probably going to be a little bit jumpy for the viewer because I'm scrubbing through it. But what I wanted to highlight here is that each of these scenes directly relates to a key moment in the movie, right? So every movie has its highs, it has its lows. And you can see from Coco here, you know, like the highs and the lows, but depending on what those low moments are, there's going to be colors like greens and cool colors, which really emit emotions of despair and sadness and you know, those types of emotions, to your high moments where there's happiness and warm colors and oranges and yellows and pinks and those types of vibrant colors. So, you know, when you're watching these films, not only are you being driven by the story, you're also being driven by music, which is, you know, obviously taking you on this journey. Can you touch that down a little bit, Philip, again?
Is that music coming in hot again?
Yeah, it's just really loud. Yeah, cool. So not only are you being driven by the story, the music, but you're also being influenced by the color of the films, right? So, and it's something that just happens subliminally that you don't even really realize, like in a lot of films. But it's all part of taking you on this emotional roller coaster. So you can see here another classic example in Coco where, you know, he's you know, at a sad moment, you know, in this movie, and you can see the colors, like it's really quite depressing and cold, and that's how they want you to feel, right? To something which is a little bit more warmer, where he's talking to his grandma and it's a beautiful moment, to these, you know, radiating colors and saturated warms and hues and stuff. And, you know, that's, and you're being influenced, but, you know, by these colors. And you've got different sort of lighting techniques. And if I just scrub through to here, where you've got hot lights hitting the face, and this is more about bringing the viewer's attention to certain you know, aspects of the shot, right? So maybe, you know, there's an important moment where Granddad here is, you know, talking to the boy, and they really want to put a focus on the grandpa here. So there's a lot more action going on that single character, and you can see the dogs. He's quite flat, you know. We're not trying to put attention on him, and the boy, you know, he's got a bit of lighting, but the main focus there is on grandpa.
Yeah, wow. And so a lot of that is like, I mean, you were comparing the shots in Coco, and like a lot of those decisions are made really early on. Is that what you're saying? Because you said they were illustrations, not renders.
Yeah, exactly. So actually, I sort of jumped ahead a little bit there. But if I was to talk about that, you know, so those, it's essentially like a blueprint for the lighting artist. So once the color palette has been established, the key lighters will then get that color script and go, okay, for this scene, I know it's going to be all, you know, blues and purples and really dark colors. So the key lighter will then go through, establish these lights, and then, you know, and then after that, you get what you call your lead lighters. And they'll come through and basically take that lighting scene and then add additional lights to add things like you can see on this image. You've got a specular highlight on the top of the head. So they'll be really like helping tell that story with additional lights. Like we looked at it in Dimension, where you'll have these additional lights added onto the environment lighting, the overall color lighting, and then the additional lights get added in. So there's a lot of levels to lighting, and it's probably, you know, it is, you know, every discipline within a pipeline is so important, because if the lighting's really bad, then, you know, it's not gonna tell the story properly, or you're not gonna convey the emotion. So yeah, you as a technical artist, I think, you know, if you've got a really good understanding of photography, of you know, sort of how light reacts on materials, you know, just you can, you know, that gives you a really good foundation for being a good lighting artist within within a 3D pipeline.
Yeah.
So you can see here we've got sort of backlighting going on here, and this backlighting is giving a really powerful posture to this character, right? Making it very intimidating, quite threatening, and that's just one light source. And you can see also in this light, we've got these rays, what they sort of call guide rays coming in. So we're going to talk about different lights in a minute, but these are, different techniques that are used when you're lighting characters. To, something like this, where there's lighting happening underneath, and you can see, the lighting on the side of our character, which is called rim lighting, and, a directional light, a spotlight hitting, below the chin here. And this is giving a really, and, quite an overpowering sort of presence to this character, a very dominating type effect. And then you've got, your classic interrogation light, sitting above your head, right. Really, really bright, beaming down on the character. So there's, again, it's really sourcing from real world type lighting. If you've got a good understanding of that, then, it really, really does help.
Are there trends in lighting? Like, are there trends that will happen throughout films, or, I don't know, Quentin Tarantino will do a particular shot and then, suddenly you'll see people imitating it? Like, is it trendy like there are in other bits of design?
Yeah, I mean, there's obviously artistic direction with certain types of films. You know what I mean? When there's always going to be the foundation and fundamentals of lighting and color in lighting and, all that sort of stuff. So there's always a base to work from. And then, people are, put their artistic spin on it. So, when you talk about Quentin Tarantino, and I think of like, movies like Sin City, where, it's very, very monochromatic, but the lighting plays a massive role within that as well, right? So, yeah, I mean, there is different techniques, and every now and then somebody will come out with a new technique, and, and it'll be kind of like, it'll be just really different, right? So, but at the base level, lighting always comes from traditional lighting, in a sense. So, but yeah, there is certain trends and techniques that are developed all the time.
Cool.
And then, for the next one, yeah, again, this was just showing that. So again, just looking, and I just wanted to put a spotlight on, like, so this is, like a key, sort of master lighting, and this is again using color, but just wanted to show like what a lead lighter or a key lighter does. So you can see in this image, we've got these bright spotlights that may not necessarily have got picked up by the actual environment lighting. So this is what, as a lead lighter, you would come through and do. So, I mean, if you're starting out as a lighting artist, a lot of the times, you'll be given like light rigs, and they'll be saying, hey, you know what, we just want you to be able to kind of take that light rig and then populate it out to maybe other shots. So you might not necessarily be setting up lights to start out with, but what that's doing is giving you the foundations to, to understand how these light rigs and key lighters actually work. So that's some of the sort of the earlier jobs, that you'll be getting as a lighting artist. Again, here's just a good image of, and for people that are wanting to understand that, there's a really great resource, and I don't know if people have heard like of Khan Academy. It's free. It's like there's so many great, amazing tutorials and stuff on Khan Academy for everything. But there's definitely pipeline 3D stuff on there that I really recommend people going to. You can see from this image, this is what a master or a key light has done. So he's gone through, and you can see that it doesn't look so bad. Like it's got lighting, you can see the vehicles, but then somebody that's got like shot lighter, somebody that's a key lighter has come through, and they've actually, brightened up that track and got more contrast in the track, so you can get a feel for, the big corner coming up. You can see they've added these highlights to the roof of the car to bring more attention to the car that's coming around the corner. You can see this little highlight, and a lot of the times it's just really subtle detail that just help, sell the story a lot better. You got that highlight, you can see more atmospheric lighting going on here with the dust being stirred up. You can, it's not happening in this master shot, but you can see this is the secondary layer of lighting that's going on. You just keep building it up.
Yeah, cool. That's super interesting.
Yeah, and I mean, you get teams in big studios of 150 people that are just purely lighting on shows. So it's a big team, and because of the complexity of lighting, it can be really heavy on computers to be able to digest all this information and then do final renders, because you've got so many lights doing so many different things. And there's one example which I'm going to show you in a minute, again referencing Coco, of just how many lights are in this scene. So this is just going through, again, it's just showing the different aspects of master and just the different levels of how people are adding additional lights to boost it. So, yeah. So this is the one that I wanted to show. Have you got this one, Flynn? Because it'd be cool.
I do.
I don't know. Do you want to play that one? It's probably a bit nicer you playing it than me.
Oh, do I have that one? I have sequence one, color script, Coco, and shot lighting. Don't know if I have this one. Sorry.
Okay. Again.
No, I don't. Sorry.
You don't? Okay, we'll see how we go. I mean, the reason why I sent them to Flynn was just the really slow internet here in Australia. But I'm just going to play through this, and this is going to gives you a really good idea of how something is created, the additional lights. And I'm not going to tell you how many lights went into this scene. I'll tell you once it's gone through. Maybe we can get some people sort of guessing at the end. Have a guess, drop it in the chat, and see what people think. But let's just play through this. So this is a shot in Coco, and it's got this massive building structure going on, and then you can see lights are being introduced slowly here. So each one of those houses has some sort of lighting in there, and then you got sort of like the street lighting, and you go through, and then it's building out the background, right? So this is the same environment, just reproduced over and over again, and each of those different models has all these different lights going on. You can see the glows, you can see point lights, you can see atmospheric lights going on, and it just keeps on going and going and going. It's just an extraordinary shot, and it blows my mind to even think about how many computers it would have taken to render this. And then to add insult to injury, you've got water down the bottom, right? So again, we're just looking at this this model, and it's just building it out, but I'm just going to jet down to there, and you can see even another layer going on there.
Wow.
What
do you think, chat? What's the guess? I'm guessing more than one. It's so interesting. So you were saying that it's basically the same rendering, but then like duplicated multiple times, and they've changed the angle a lot. Like, do they try to save some, like there's some trickery going on there rather than like completely rebuilding everything from scratch each time?
Yeah, exactly. So when I think, in episode 2, when I was talking about texturing and talking about what they call instancing, so they'll create sort of a hero asset and then duplicate that. But instead of like reproducing the lights, it's just instancing that same one over and over again. And there's lots of sort of trickery that they use, when they're optimizing these scenes to, so individually, there is a lot of lights, but, there might only be one that's controlling, one type of light that's controlling all these sort of red glowing ones, right? So there's just lots of cheating going on to kind of get this final lit rendered scene. But it still blows my mind. But did we have some numbers in the chat?
Yep. So Festus, 20 or more separate lighting rigs per segment. Johanna's guessing 86. Yeah, I'm guessing in the hundreds. Like I'll go 100. How many?
There was more than 7 million.
All right, we were off by a couple of magnitudes. Wow. Far out.
7 million lights. Yeah, they actually wrote a lot of articles around the scene that you can find online. But, like I said, there's a lot of cheating going on in the backgrounds, and even when they do the final renders. Like when they do this, things are split out And think of it like I was showing you in Dimension, and how Photoshop has got you different layers. So when and we're going to talk more about this when we get to the rendering segment of this series, but everything is split out into layers, so that you've got greater control, and B, you can render different layers out, and you're not doing it all in one sort of massive calculation for the computer. So it does it in bite size, right? So, for example, for something like this, you go through and maybe it was just all the internal lighting of the buildings that are all rendered out. And then you've got all the sort of the little spotlights with these glows and that are rendered out on, then maybe they're just the red ones. So everything is split out, and then they bring it all back together in a final composite.
Yeah, wow. Incredible. And how many, you were mentioning, you shuddered to think how many computers and processing power, like how does that work? Are there like render farms or something? Like, are there agencies who focus specifically on that the creators will, I don't know, create stuff and then send it to people? How does that actually work in practice for something like this?
Yeah, so for big studios, generally they'll have their own render farm. So, and that means, like hundreds and hundreds of computers all, stacked up and when I say computers, like there's, it's just the CPU and the GPU. So that'll be just all like in a big room. They'll have air conditioning in there to keep the temperature down. Right. Like there's this massive render farms, right, to be able to render this stuff. And then, you'll get smaller studios that maybe they'll have render farm. Now you can have access render farms on the cloud. So you'll send this file to the cloud, and then there'll be, a rendering service that'll render it for you. But generally, like the big studios will have their own render farms, and, specific software set up so that they can send all this stuff out and be able to get it back. But, something like this could take days to render. So, you think about, this one this one frame could take, days, right? And you've got however many frames in a film. That's why it just takes so long. And the next segment of this episode today is talking about effects. So, you can think about the magnitude of lighting at the moment, and then you add in effects on top of that. Like it's just crazy, all the complexity and how how all this stuff actually gets calculated out.
Yeah, absolutely. Johanna was asking, do we know the render time for this shot?
Oh, mate, I don't off the top of my head, but it's a lot. It's a huge amount. Yeah. So just to bring it all back again, now that our minds have been blown, I just wanted to come in here and really just look at. Whoops! I just want to bring that out. I just want to look at a scene in Maya and just kind of go, okay, if we wanted to get back to lighting a basic character in a 3D program, what does that look like? And what controls do we have that we can, quickly set something up? So again, I'm just tapped into Eddie here, our character, and I'm just going to throw this over into perspective view so we can see what's happening. So I've got him in wireframe. Actually, maybe I'll just stick him in shaded there. And you can see Eddie, our character here, is just sitting on a ground plane. I've just added a piece of geometry, and to do that, I've just gone create polygons and then plane down here. So I've just added him so that it basically gives us a plane for our shadows to fall on. Okay, so there's a few options inside the 3D programs, and you can see on here I've got this rendering shelf selected, and we've got our different lights up here. So just to talk a little bit about these. So we've got directional, we've got ambient, we've got our point light, we've got our spotlight, and we've got area lights. So when we look at ambient lighting, really this is creating a light which immerses lighting in all directions, and it's helping us give soft shadows. And, this could be something like the sun, that, just is projecting light and it's just in all directions. And then we've got directional lighting. So this is really what the name suggests. It's directing light in a certain direction. So that could be things like, if you've got the moon projecting down and you're wanting to get a big vibrant light, you can do directional lighting. And then the next one, we've got point light. So point lights are used for things like candles, for Christmas lights, for glowing objects, anything that, again, emits lighting from all directions, but in a, really concentrated energy ball. So they're point lights. So they would have used a lot of point lights in something like that scene of Coco that we looked at.
Awesome.
Then we've
I realized I haven't mentioned before, just if you guys are watching this on YouTube, because I know there's been some new people that have jumped in. If you do have questions for Alwyn as we're going along, the chat we're using is over at behance.net, so be.net/live. If you want to ask questions, feel free to ask questions at any point, especially while we've got Alwyn here. This is part of a 3-part series, but if you've got questions at all about 3D or any of the stuff that we're talking about, feel free to throw them in chat.
Yeah, happy to answer any questions. Just moving through our different lights there, you can see we've got a few that we can set up. And then we're also in Maya, we've got additional options, and we've got lights in here as well. So some are similar. Just to talk about a couple in here, if you're working in architectural visualization and you've built out a room, and maybe it's got, fluorescent lights, or it's got, LED lighting, whatever the different lighting options are, you can use this option here. And actually you can find the numerical value for each of these lights. There's a lookup where you can go on the internet and find out what these light numbers are, enter those details in there, and you'll get your warm glows or your cool looks or your LED type look by using these types of lights. So very popular in sort of architectural visualization circles. Again, Sky Dome is similar to a big ball, and you're able to map an image onto your Sky Dome, similar to what we were looking at in Dimension, where you can use an image to control your lighting. So let me just create actually what I'll do first is maybe I'll just create some basic lights. So I can create like a spotlight. You can see down here, if I hit W, you can see it's created this spotlight in between Eddie's legs there. So I might just pull that back a little bit. I'm going to just position it so he's kind of looking at Eddie. And there's a cool feature here where if I go up to panels, I can look through selected. So now I'm actually looking through my spotlight. So I can just pull this back and just position my model or position my light so that it's looking at my model where I want. So if I go back into my spotlight options here, and you can see I've got Arnold because I'm using an Arnold light. So I'm just going to add some exposure to that so we can see what that looks like. So I've got 5, and then I can also play around with the intensity of my light. So what I want to do is just to be able to do a quick render so we can see if that spotlight's working. So I've created a camera, and this is my render camera. So it's just a new camera. So I can go up to create, and I've got cameras here, and I can create a new camera. This is what I've done here. And you can see here I've got my render camera. I've got my spotlight, which I've created. And I'm just going to go up and just move that for a sec because that's getting in the way. And then I'm going to go up and I'm going to hit render. And what that's going to do is actually just create a render in, you can see I've got getting a little bit of a highlight. It's not much going on. Actually, I'm just going to close that down, and maybe I want to see how that looks. I can render in the viewport here, and I'm just going to go render.
Eddie was really dark and really hiding in the shadows there.
Yeah. So what I need to do, it's telling me, okay, so this is a really, if you're first starting out in 3D, sometimes you'll be playing with these settings and you're like, why is nothing working? I've got lights in there. It's just nothing's coming through. So, a good thing to do is really just go extreme with numbers, right? So maybe I'll do, 300 or something as intensity just to see what, and you can see there, boom, okay, my the intensity wasn't high enough. Or maybe I need to go down to my exposure here and just actually add more exposure. So I'll add exposure there. And when you can see now it's really bright, right? So I'll come back and maybe I'll drop that intensity down. So a lot of the times it's just experimenting with values to find out what's the perfect sort of balance.
Yeah, and
so you can
like
see
going
here,
really extreme and one way or the other to see what's it actually doing, which is funny because that's something that we'll often see with people who are on Adobe Live giving advice on how to learn a lot of software. Like if you're looking at Lightroom or Photoshop, is to play with the sliders and look at what is the extreme thing, what's it actually doing to the image and the pixels, and then kind of bringing it back as a really good way to learn what exactly each thing is doing.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, when you've been in any industry for long enough, that's always like, a good artist, particularly in working with 3D or visual effects or whatever it may be, you have to be able to troubleshoot, because these programs are so, you can get lost like in an instant, right? You can get in here and start playing with all these different parameters and, get lost very quickly and nothing works. So, whenever I'm talking to students, I'm like, you keep it as simple as possible. Just, before you start playing around with dials, try and understand, exactly what they do, right? Take it to extreme values, but bring it back if it's not working, because obviously it's something else is at play, right? So troubleshooting is a key factor in any of these disciplines, whether it's texturing, modeling, rigging, lighting, effects. You need to be able to troubleshoot, and that's a skill set. Essentially, you're trying to refine what the issue might be, and sometimes that's just not taught. So we can see here with our spotlight, we've got a bunch of different options here. I can change the cone angle. So maybe if I just punch that up, you can see it's changing the cone shape at the bottom on the floor there.
Right.
I've got the penumbrum angle. Penumbrum angle essentially just changes how soft the shadow is on the edge there. And you can see it's just changing the harshness of the edge there. So I can go positive or I can go negative, and it'll soften on the inside of my cone. So depending on what I want to do. And
that was a penumbrum angle, was it?
Penumbrum. Yeah, penumbrum.
Okay.
Penumbra. A tongue twister. Say that 10 times, Flynn.
That's it.
So, yeah, again, we've got a lot of control. I can change the color of my light. I can change, the drop off of the shot. I can go in and I've got you can see different menus in here. I can control the color of my shadow, all these different options. And that's what I was saying about getting lost very, very easily. So I can go through and maybe I want to add like a little point light. So again, I can create this, and you can see even my computer, my laptop, it's working overtime at the moment. Again, I've got my little spotlight here. Maybe I'm just going to pull that up, and maybe I just want to use this spotlight to be able to get some really nice little specular highlights. So I'm going to pull it to the side. And again, I'm going to go into my Arnold setting because that's what I'm rendering in. I'm going to kick that exposure up to 100. You can see that's way too bright, right? So we already know that's way too bright. So maybe I'll bring that down to say 50. Still too bright. So maybe it only needs to be 5. So, right, and you can see that it's introduced these little specular highlights now. So if I move that across, it's jumped across to the other side of my model now. So this, when you're thinking about character lighting, so if this guy was actually animating, I'd have to group my lights with my character so that when it moved, these lights actually moved with it, right? So there's a whole grouping process that goes on. And you can see here, if I select my character, I've got it like in a group or a folder. And underneath in that folder, I've got all my bits of geometry. So then I can, again, go through and add my spotlights as part of that group. And when it moves, my lights will move with it. Then you've got things like I was saying before, you've got the sky dome light. So if I just drop that in, what we're going to see with this is it's going to create a big ball, and I'm going to just drop out of our renderer here for a second. I'm going to drop this back into, and it's just thinking because I've dropped that in.
Yeah, it kind of comes back to a question that we get every live stream, so we might ask it now: is what sort of like software, not software, but what sort of hardware do you need to invest in, sort of to get into 3D? It's a question that comes up a lot, so I'm sure some people are asking.
Yeah, I mean, like in the first episode, I was sort of showing people that you could be modeling even in a browser window on your computer at home. You actually don't even need to download any software. So as an entry point, you can go through and use those types of apps. If you're wanting to get into the more serious programs like Maya, then you're going to need something that's pretty chunky. So this one, my laptop here, I've got an NVIDIA RTX 1080 graphics card, 2080, not 1080, 2080 graphics card. And it's got, some serious CPU as well as GPU. So, because I demo a lot, so obviously I have got multiple programs running at one time. If you're at home and you've got a decent computer, then, you wouldn't have Photoshop, Dimension, and all these other programs running at the same time. So really it's just thinking about, okay, if I'm going to work in 3D, I just need to minimize everything else, right? But, programs like this, they are, and even like Substance, they are very CPU and GPU hungry and intensive. So you do need to splash out and buy yourself a decent computer. But if you just want to play around with things, then just jump on, those links that were in episode 1, and you can do it on your browser.
Nice.
Right. So just to show what that dome light did, you can see we've got this giant ball in here now, and that's just really engulfing everything that's in our scene. Right. And using this and this giant dome, I can actually go in. And you can see here Sky Dome, and I can actually go through and actually assign a HDRI image to that. And I'm going to talk about that a little bit in the next session. And this is kind of a new way of lighting objects, and it's really about trying to get as believable as possible and making things as real or real world as possible. So you can see from the examples of adding all these lights and trying to fake things and emulate real world, but it's really faking everything. And there's an issue with that when you're working in the industry that, again, you might be working on a character like this that has 20 different lights on it. As soon as you take it out of one shot or scene and put it into another scene, those same lights might not work. So then you're having to go through, tweak all these lights. It's very manual work and very labor intensive. So this new technique of physically based rendering, which is something, Substance is quite, that's where its technology is based around PBR or physically based rendering. So, I'm going to talk a little bit about that and just show you how that works as well. But you can map an image onto there and be able to use the image to be able to light this character. So maybe it's a good time to do that now, actually, just so that we can see that technique. So I'm just going to minimize Maya scene for a sec, unless somebody's got some questions in Maya.
Not yet, guys. Yeah, so just ask us questions if you do have specific questions. There was definitely some questions around just getting lost in 3D, and I guess that's what this whole series is all about. Really, is to have a very very easy entry level for everybody, particularly designers and things like that. A lot of that stuff we kind of covered in the first episode. As Alwyn was saying, things you could do right now, just literally go to a browser and play around with 3D models and stuff like that. A lot of kind of entry level things. But I think we get this with After Effects quite a lot, to a lesser extent Premiere, is people coming from a visual design kind of background, digital design, that kind of thing, looking at something like 3D and being a bit overwhelmed. And I think it's mostly the menus and terminology is a little bit alien. That's what we're trying to demystify a little bit. But as Alwyn was said, I think trying to keep it as simple as possible and not to be overwhelmed and use the resources that are available is a really great way to wrap your head around it.
Yeah, and next week's episode, I'm going to spend a lot more time about, hey, where do I go for these? We've covered it a little bit, but what I really want to do is go, hey, here's some schools that are teaching purely effects or purely lighting, or here's some institutes or some resources online where you can go now. Here's some great articles that have written about each of these roles that we've discussed and sort of breaks them down. I just really, for part of next week, I really want to be able to have a lot of information that viewers can take away and go, oh my God, this is where I start. This is amazing, right? So, and like I said, I'm working in Maya. Maya is the one of the top high-end 3D modeling programs. So, if you take a step back, you can download software like Blender, which is free. It's open source, big community. You can start just playing around in that straight away. If you've got Substance, you can download Substance for free and be able to use that today straight away. So there's options to be able to start playing around with it. But just when you're starting out, keep it simple.
And there was a question, actually, just very quickly before we jump into this part. But Camilla was asking, what about the new wave of more illustrative 3D renderings, 3D that imitates animation and comics? Yeah,
great question. So there's different software out there that really. So there's Harmony, which is by Boontoon, and that's a piece of software it's really going back to the grassroots 2D animation, 3D animation, and being able to animate in that world, and it looks like it's 2D animation, and it's beautiful. There's like Maya, there's options to be able to use called shaders, kind of 2D. So even when you look at a lot of 2D animation TV series or kids series now that look 2D, it's actually all done in 3D, because the animation, like I was talking about last week, the amount of time that you can save on animation is huge if you're able to do it in a 3D program. You haven't got all those drawings that you have to do. So even though the 2D programs that we're watching, a lot of them are 3D. So the one that I think that you're referring to is Toon Boom, and it's a fantastic program for that style of 2D animation, 3D kind of split.
Cool. Yeah, nice one. And
it's actually making a big comeback. Like that type of animation as well. Very stylized, but there's definite job opportunities coming back within those types of software.
Awesome.
So I've just jumped across into Substance Painter, and we were in here a few weeks ago where we textured up our character and used our materials, and I think I touched on it briefly, but there is a little menu item down here called Environments. So we can see here that if I just drag one of these images into my viewport, so maybe it's this one here, you can see how it's instantly had an effect on my model. So again, it's using the image to really light our character. So I've got this one. So what I'm going to do is just jump across here, and then we can see that this is the image map being used. And what does that look like? Again, I can click on here and I can select different images to be able to light my character. And I'm going to just bring up the opacity, and I'm going to knock down the blur. And you can see here, this is the image that's being used to light our character in this 3D viewport. Now I can do a couple of things here. I can rotate the image around my character, and you can see how that's having an influence on the lighting of my character.
So is this a 360 photo? Is that what's happening here?
Exactly. And what I want to do is just show you what this image actually looks like. So if I just bounce again, I'm bouncing around a lot, across and I'm going to pull up actually this one here. This one here. And you can see we've got this image and what that looks like in Photoshop. So I can right click on these images and go, show and folder. And then I can actually open this image up in Photoshop. I think that's the image, or it's one in Substance Painter. Now, the big difference with this is, yes, like Flynn, you said, it's a 360 image. And if we look at the bit depth up here, we can see that it's a 32-bit image. So we're used to working in like 8-bit or 16-bit if you're doing, 16-bit, right? This image is 32-bit. Now, what does that tell you, Flynn? When you see 32-bit, what does that tell you about this image?
I don't know. I think maybe there's just heaps more information in there.
Exactly right. If we look at this file size, this image alone is 24 megs. So what it's doing, it's just a lot more color information, a lot more. So even, you can see here we've got our light source. There's just more information that's being actually projected onto our surface to give it a more realistic lighting feel, right? So this is the type of lighting and realism that we want in our characters, or we expect to get in our characters nowadays. So if I just jump back across to Substance Painter, so we can see that this character is using, and what it's doing is it's actually looking at this as the main light source. So we can rotate around our character and we can see, where that light, and we can see it's actually hitting our material here. Right. But at the big thing when Substance sort of came out was that this for me as an industry professional and as a texture artist was like a godsend. Like to be able to actually work and texture a character and know that, okay, this lighting environment is reacting correctly, or my materials are reacting correctly to my lighting environment, so that when I export out my textures for the lighting guy who's using this exact same lighting, that I know that that it's working, right? Before, in the old days, I would go through, texture a character like this, and my texture maps would be just kind of sent to the next department, and I'd have no real idea whether they were working or not. And I'd sit there, cross my fingers, and hope that those textures didn't come back, and I'd have to adjust. 9 times out of 10, they would always come back, right? So you'd be caught in this endless loop of working with the lighting artist to adjust your texture maps because it wasn't working, and every texture artist had a different way and technique to be able to texture a model. So it was horrible. It was a mess. So when this came on the scene, it was just, oh my goodness, we're actually being able to know that when we export our texture maps, they are working. And it stopped that endless loop. So if I just do a character here in Substance, icon up the top here, and that's just going to go through, and the first one's always a little bit slow, but it's going to go through and render my my model now in this environment. And you can see there that it's sitting on the ground plane, it's got characters, and I can actually go through and interact in real time with my background here. So again, and you can see it's rendering on the fly, which is really, really cool.
Wow. And
I can again move my character around if I want to, make it bigger or smaller, or just reposition them. I can either do that and then, again, move the image if I need to. But that whole 360 image that we looked in Photoshop is the same image that I can remap big dome. So I'm getting exactly the same type of render in Maya.
Yeah, wow. Pretty cool. And you mentioned it before, you were breaking up just a little bit because I think your computer was rendering everything at the same time, but you said you can change the scale and everything, right? Like when you put him in, put in our little Beetlebot, Eddie, into the situation, it kind of put him quite small, but you can play with the scale. If you make changes with, to the texture or something, does it sync automatically? Do you have to replace or something like that?
No, so that's the beauty of real-time rendering, is that you can reposition it. It's rendering it on the fly, Flynn. So, like in After Effects, it's almost like when you're scrubbing through your timeline in After Effects and it's cached it out type thing. Yeah. It's what it's doing. It's rendering on the fly. So, you're not having to sit there and wait for this render to happen like you do in the sort of the final version of After Effects, but which is just amazing. And this is kind of the new technology, real-time rendering. Instead of having to wait, it's just rendering it on the fly. And you can update your textures and it will automatically update in that render scene. You can reposition it, it will re-render. So it's just, like I said, it's real-time rendering.
Cool.
So we can see here, we've got a different background. I can then, again, just re-render this guy, and you see he's dropped it in the environment, the shadow acting on the ground plane, and you can go through. If I didn't want to use, you know, an image, I can go through, and there's a few settings in here where I can just go, you know what, I just want to use a base color. So I can just do that, and maybe I want to do, you know, maybe a complementary color or something like that where I use a blue. If I'm doing a presentation for a customer, whatever it may be. And I can remove the ground plane so it's not sitting on it. Yeah, so there's a lot of different things you can tweak. I can save this image, you know, save it out as an image and be able to, you know, export that out.
Nice.
If I just scrub that down. Yeah, save render as a JPEG or as a PNG, whatever it may be. Cool. So we've got our character, and yeah, like I said, if I bring back Maya just here for a second, you can see here, I can go in here and I can just go, you know, I've selected my sky dome instead of a base color. And actually, I'm just going to throw this back over into our 3D viewer. And I'm going to just bring up my render cam. And I'm just going to knock out those point lights or those directional and point lights. I'm just going to remove them, and I'm just going to let the sky dome. See, I've just created that sky dome. I haven't had to position anything. It's just, you know, it's lit my character straight off the bat. So again, I'm going to click into the sky dome, and I can go through and then select a background image if I need to. I can just go through and create a, you know, use a file, source that file, and bring that in.
Wow.
Cool. So where are we up to? I need to regroup here, Flynn. Regroup.
Okay.
So
well, we've only got about 10 minutes left, by the way. So that's good to let you know, and it's also good for chat. So if you do have any final questions for us today, we are back next week with Alwyn, but that is the end of our series as well. So if you do have questions, feel free to ask them now. But yeah, we're back with part 4 next week.
Yeah. Yep. And this, I mean, just a shout out to Wes and the guys on. So if I just bring up our browser here, I'm just going to pull this across. To understand this physically based rendering, I think I mentioned it in episode 1. We can come up here and you can see on Substance Academy, we've got this. Wes has done an amazing job of demystifying this whole physically based rendering and shading. And it's really in layman's terms. It's, you know, when you get into lighting and materials and how lights react to certain materials, there's a real science behind it. But he's done a fantastic job of just really explaining what happens and, you know, how subsurface works and all these techniques and naming terminologies that go with lighting and shading to help you understand what it all means. You can download this as a PDF. I'm just scrubbing up the top here. I think it's right up the top. You can download the guide as a PDF. And again, it helps you understand everything.
Cool.
So that's a great resource. Learning to render. There's some really good articles on the rookies if you're wanting to learn how to render like a Pixar artist. Again, these are really great breakdowns of somebody that's gone through and done, you know, the different stages of lighting to again help you understand that. And what else? There's free light rigs out there. You know, if you wanted to get a studio light rig that's been created, then you can download these light rigs for free, import in your 3D model, and be able to just, you know, you've got a default light rig already set up.
Oh, cool.
So there's lots of resources out there. You just got to go digging for it. I mean, like I said, there's a lot of resources on the rookies where you can find this information out. and know that it's kind of a central area for people to be able to find this stuff. So yeah, it's so Flynn, how much time do we have now?
We've got time, but we've also got a couple of questions. So we've got about like 8 minutes left or so. So maybe we can hit some questions up if you like.
Yeah, awesome.
I think I'll just do one quick shout out to the rookies. Maybe you could bring the rookies website up just one more time, because that's an organization you are still part of and have been part of before coming on with Adobe. And yeah, you sort of mentioned it like it's a really great resource, and I've been through a lot of it, and it's fantastic like to see these communities like it seems like a very giving community, which reminds me a lot of the photography community that I'm not really part of so much, but from the outside in, there's so much sharing. There's so much teaching, there's so much free information, knowledge, resources out there for those that are looking for it. So maybe you could just give us a quick idea of the rookies.
Yeah, just to give it a quick sort of plug, Flynn, you know, the struggle, you know, that students have trying to get into these industries is that, you know, the information is so scattered, you know, like, and it's really hard to find one area where you go, look, I just want to know where the best schools are to study this stuff in the world. I just want to be able to, you know, find out exactly what these roles mean. I want to find out, you know, from a junior artist, what that first day or what that first experience is going to be like working at a big studio, right? So the Rookies is all about supporting people on their journey to get into these industries. So we have a really vibrant community. And this area that we're looking at here is really the sort of the blog area and this, or the hub for information. So in here, you can go up the top and look at schools. That lists out the top ranked schools in the world for studying these types of industries. And then when you look at you know, there's an insider's guide to Lost Boys. Lost Boys, I know for a fact, they teach effects and lighting. You know, they specialize in visual effects for lighting and effects. You know, and then, you know, the best websites for finding free light rigs. So it's just a really great resource for young people trying to get in there. And then on the main site, you know, we have like where you can create your very first portfolio or area to, you know, if you're you know, a bit shy, or you're starting out and you don't want to be exposed to, you know, industry professionals, then this site is only for junior people getting into the industry, right? We don't allow industry professionals on here. So there's a whole bunch of areas that you can go into. You can enter contests, which are just basically for young people. You can see here, I mean, there's young people already doing amazing work. And, you know, but there's people like yourself that are debuts, we call them, that are just like, I'm just started. This is the first time that I've ever actually got into 3D, but they're just posting their stuff and they're getting community feedback and they're getting support and getting confidence and finding out the right road to go to be able to, you know, then enlist schools and making smart decisions, right? So
awesome.
It's an amazing resource, and, you know, thoroughly read that are wanting to find out more about it, just to jump on, find out some of these, you know, read some of these articles. A lot of these articles are done by students as well. So yeah, that's
awesome. Yeah, so definitely check out the Rookies, everybody, if you're looking to learn more. We've got 2 questions I want to get to before we say thank you. Mal was asking, how much RAM do you recommend to have a smooth workflow? As much as you can get, I suppose, is the answer. But
yeah, I mean, exactly. The more that you can get, the you know, the better it's going to be. I mean, you know, 8 gigs, 16 gigs, you know, is you know, if you can get to that, then you're in a much better space. But again, like I said, it's about, a lot of the time it's about working smartly, right? So making sure you close down all your other apps and just being able to optimize and you know, even in the industry, when, you know, I'm working in the industry or have worked in the industry, you know, I'm just like, I've got everything open and I'm like, why is this so slow? You know, because you get lazy when you get a really fast computer. So it actually develops good habits if you haven't got an amazing machine, but to be able to kind of work smartly, right? So again, it's not adding 7 million lights to your scene, or maybe smoothing geometry with so many subdivisions that you can hardly see the actual polygons. It's just working clever, working smartly. I mean, you don't have to go extremely high-end machine to be able to do this stuff. You don't. You know,
Yeah.
I've got my MacBook. I'm able to run Maya on that. You know, and like I said, just run it efficiently without having everything open. So, you know, you don't have to have that crazy high-end machine to get started. That's
Cool.
all I'll say. Yeah.
Awesome. And final question, I think, for today. Camilla was asking, what is the first step to developing a 3D mindset over a 2D one?
Say that again, Flynn. Sorry, mate.
What is the first step in developing, or maybe what are some good tips for developing a 3D mindset over a 2D one? So I guess for those that have like a lot of experience with 2D and then going into that 3D, like it's a whole new plane. You've got to think about lighting, textures, potentially motion, animation. There's a lot of extra stuff to think about.
Well, the good news is that you've already got a lot of those base principles and fundamentals that you need to understand, right? So you're already ahead of the game if you've got really good 2D knowledge. And it depends on what area you want to specialize in. So if you're wanting to go into 2D and animation, 3D animation, and you want to be an animator, then you've got an amazing skill set already. A lot of those skills, and that's kind of the common theme with a lot of these 3D disciplines, is that if you've got core skills in real life animation or photography, or when we talk about effects, we talk about simulations and understanding physics, then you're going to be ahead of the game. So it depends on what area you want to get in. But what I will say, if you've got a really good understanding of 2D, then you're gonna be really starting with a good knowledge base already. So that's great.
Oh, awesome! That's great advice. Go on.
Sorry, just to add to that, Flynn, I was just going to say, when you're applying for a lot of these schools for 3D animation, what they want to see is your 2D or traditional portfolio. They just want to see that you're artistic. Oh, look at that person. They've got an amazing portfolio, right. And they understand light, they understand form, they understand, weight and dynamics and all that sort of stuff. So don't think that you need to have a portfolio that's 3D to be able to get into this industry. I mean, I talk to a lot of high school students, and it's like, hey, you know what? It's a good balance of artistic and technical. So, get into photography, understand these things. You can do a lot of stuff externally before you even start applying for these courses. There's so much content online to be able to just understand these basic principles of traditional first, and then you can start looking into the 3D and visual effects side of things.
Awesome. That's great. That's great advice. And thanks for the questions, everybody. So we're back. So this was episode 3 of our 4-part series. So we're back with our final episode next week. It's gone very fast with Alwyn, which will be awesome. So same time as we were this week. Really looking forward to having you back on. I
don't know on the screen, but I'm just flashing effects because VFX, I didn't even get into that today. So there's a whole section there that I still want to cover. But what, lighting is so important that I'm glad that we managed to get through that. So thank you, everybody, for tuning in. And Flynn, thank you very much again.
Thank you. And I'll see you next week. And hey, guys, stick around for Andrew and the Illustrator Creative Challenge. See you in chat. Bye.
Awesome. See you, Flynn.